The chandeliers sparkled like frozen constellations above the ballroom, spilling their golden light across the marble floors and glittering gowns. The air hummed with the clink of crystal glasses, the rustle of silk dresses, the polite laughter of men and women who knew they were being watched. It was the kind of night where power wore a smile and secrets hid behind pearls and diamonds. Adrian Blackwood stood near the edge of the crowd, his jaw tight, his glass of champagne untouched. He had attended hundreds of galas like this, but tonight he felt the walls closing in. Across the room, a familiar figure moved with calculated grace. Vanessa, the woman who had once known every piece of him and who had nearly destroyed him when she left. She was smiling now, her arm linked with a senator, her eyes locked on Adrian like a predator who had scented blood. Behind her, photographers shifted, sensing the storm. He had told himself he could handle her return, that her sudden reappearance in New York wouldn't shake him. But as she broke away from her entourage and began to glide toward him, her smile sharpening, Adrian felt a rare flicker of panic. She wanted a scene. He could see it in her eyes. She wanted the cameras to catch her beside him, to twist the story, to make it look as though she still owned a piece of his life. He set down his glass, his mind racing. He needed an out, something clean, something that would redirect the attention before Vanessa reached him. His gaze swept the room, desperate, and then he saw her. She was standing by the champagne table, half hidden behind a cluster of laughing socialites. Not dressed like them. Her gown was simple, elegant but understated, a deep green that caught the light when she moved. Her hair was pinned in a way that suggested practicality, not vanity. She looked like she didn't belong here at all, like she'd stumbled into this glittering world by accident. And maybe that was why Adrian's eyes locked on hers. In an instant, his decision was made. Adrian crossed the distance in 3 strides, ignoring the startled looks that followed him. He stopped in front of her, his hand closing gently but firmly around hers. Her eyes widened, startled, lips parting as if to protest, but he didn't give her the chance. "Trust me," he whispered, low enough that only she could hear, and then he pulled her forward. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Flashbulbs burst to life, voices rose in surprise, and Vanessa froze in her tracks, fury flashing across her perfect face. To everyone watching, Adrian Blackwood had just claimed a woman no one knew, a stranger plucked from the edges of the gala and pulled into his orbit, as though she had always belonged there. Elena Hart stumbled slightly, her pulse racing as she found herself pressed to the side of one of the most powerful men in the city. She had come tonight only because a co-worker had begged her to attend. She was no socialite, no heiress. She was a book editor who spent most nights buried in manuscripts and overdue bills. And now, somehow, she was the center of a scene that would be splashed across every headline by morning. Adrian kept his arm around her, guiding her away from Vanessa's path, shielding her with the sharp authority of his presence. The cameras clicked faster, capturing every angle, every fleeting glance between them. To the world, it looked like intimacy. To Elena, it felt like madness. She tried to pull back, whispering, "What are you doing?" But Adrian only tightened his hold, his eyes locked on Vanessa as if daring her to take another step closer. In that single, breathless moment, Elena's life shifted. She didn't know why this man had chosen her, or what storm she was being dragged into. All she knew was that her name, and her face, would be everywhere by sunrise, and nothing would ever be the same again. A storm of flashing lights that would not fade. By morning, Elena Hart's face was plastered across every gossip column, every digital headline, every television segment that thrived on scandal. She sat at her small kitchen table, her hands curled around a chipped mug of coffee, staring at her phone as it vibrated endlessly with messages. Some from co-workers in shock, some from strangers already calling her a gold digger, and one from her younger sister begging to know what was happening. The truth was, she didn't know herself. All she could remember was the firm grasp of Adrian Blackwood's hand, the weight of his voice telling her to trust him, and the dizzy blur of cameras swallowing her whole. She hadn't been able to sleep, replaying the scene again and again, her heart still trapped in that moment of chaos. By the time she reached her office, whispers chased her like shadows. The publishing house where she worked was quiet, but the quiet was worse than noise. Her co-workers stole glances, some envious, some cruel, some simply curious. She tried to bury herself in manuscripts, but the words on the pages swam uselessly before her eyes. Then came the knock. She looked up, and her stomach dropped. Standing at her doorway was the very man who had upended her life. Adrian Blackwood, in a tailored suit that belonged in a world far above hers, his presence filling the cramped office until it felt like there was no air. "You should not be here," Elena whispered, her voice low, but her pulse betrayed her. "I had no choice," Adrian said. His tone was smooth but urgent, carrying the weight of someone who wasn't used to being refused. "The media will not let this go, not unless we control the story." Elena rose from her chair, her palms damp. "Control the story? How exactly? You dragged me into something I never asked for." His eyes met hers, dark and sharp, yet softened by something she couldn't name. "I need your help. Vanessa is circling like a vulture, waiting for me to make a mistake. Last night gave me an escape, but it only works if you stay in this with me." She blinked, stunned. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" The word hung heavy in the air, absurd and dangerous all at once. Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I will make sure your sister's college tuition is covered. I will make sure the gossip doesn't crush you. All I need is for you to stand by me, just for a few weeks." Elena's chest tightened. The promise of security for her sister tugged at the deepest corners of her heart, but the risk of being tangled in Adrian's world was terrifying. He was power, polished marble, and piercing eyes. She was debt, paperbacks, and quiet corners. Yet behind his calm mask she saw it, just for a fleeting moment. The flicker of desperation, of a man who could buy anything but still found himself cornered. The office seemed to shrink around them, every sound from outside fading as she struggled to breathe. Finally, she whispered, "You are asking me to step into your lie. What if it destroys me?" Adrian's gaze held hers, steady and unyielding. "Or what if it saves us both?" And in that suspended moment, Elena realized she had stepped into something much larger than herself. She had been chosen not by chance, but by a twist of fate that neither of them fully understood. The suspense outside their door only grew louder, because across the city, Vanessa watched the headlines too, her smile sharp as glass, already plotting her first strike. Elena stepping into a world that didn't belong to her. The sleek black car waiting outside her apartment gleamed like a silent warning. Adrian was inside, waiting, his expression carved in stone as the door swung open. She hesitated on the curb, clutching her worn bag, feeling the weight of neighbors' curious stares. One step into that car meant crossing a line she could never retreat from. She slid inside, the leather cold against her skin. Adrian's gaze swept over her, not unkind, but assessing, like he was measuring if she could survive what was coming. The silence between them hummed with tension, broken only when he finally spoke. "Tonight, we set the rules. If Vanessa sees a crack, she will tear it open." The name sent a chill down Elena's spine. She had seen Vanessa on magazine covers, always perfect, always dangerous. She could not imagine standing across from that woman without faltering. "And what happens if I fail?" Elena asked, her voice tight. Adrian's jaw flexed. "Then she wins, and I lose more than you can imagine." Their destination was a private dinner, a gathering of powerful investors and board members whose opinions could make or break Adrian's empire. Elena stepped out of the car on his arm, blinded by the sudden storm of flashes. Cameras screamed her name, twisting her identity into something foreign. "Mystery woman," they shouted. "Blackwood's secret love." She clung tighter to Adrian's arm, the pretense suddenly feeling frighteningly real. Inside the glowing hall, chandeliers burned and polished men in tailored suits circled like predators. Adrian leaned down, his breath brushing her ear. "Smile, Elena. They will eat hesitation alive." She forced her lips into a curve, though her pulse thundered in her ears. Whispers followed her every move, women eyeing her gown with envy, Men watching her with suspicion. She wasn't one of them, and they knew it. But when Adrian looked at her, steady and sure, she almost believed she could be. Then the shadow arrived. Vanessa glided into the hall, her beauty sharpened into a weapon, her gown cut like a blade of crimson silk. She wasted no time approaching, her laugh echoing like broken glass. "Adrian," she purred, eyes flicking to Elena with cold precision. "You do know how to surprise me. Who is this enchanting creature?" The room leaned closer, hungry for blood. Elena's throat closed, panic surging, but Adrian squeezed her hand gently, anchoring her. His smile was flawless, his voice calm. "This is Elena, the woman who has my heart." Gasps rippled through the room. Elena froze, her mind spinning, but she caught herself in time to nod politely, forcing her voice not to tremble. "It's an honor." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, sharp as daggers. The game had begun, and Elena knew she had just become a target. Later, when the evening finally ended, Elena collapsed into the car seat, her body trembling from the effort of holding herself together. Adrian studied her quietly. "You did well," he said. She turned on him, anger sparking. "You threw me into a battlefield without warning. She looked at me like she wanted to destroy me." His answer was simple, his voice low and edged. "She does, but if we stand together, she can't." And in that moment, Elena realized this was no harmless arrangement. This was war dressed in diamonds and whispered lies, and she was already in too deep to escape. The city glittering below as Adrian's limousine rolled toward the grand charity ball. Elena sat beside him, her palms damp, her heart pounding louder with each passing block. The silk gown he had chosen for her shimmered in the dim light, but she felt like an imposter draped in borrowed elegance. The closer they drew to the ballroom, the more the truth pressed against her chest. She was a book editor who lived paycheck to paycheck, not a woman meant for flashing cameras and high society. Adrian's voice broke the silence. "Tonight is crucial. The story of us has to be convincing. No hesitation, no cracks. They must believe we belong together." His tone was firm but not cruel, his eyes steady on her face. "And if they don't?" she asked softly, her throat dry. His jaw tightened. "Then Vanessa wins, and I refuse to give her that victory." The car doors opened, and the world exploded in light. Photographers surged forward, shouting questions, their flashes slicing through the night. Adrian stepped out first, tall and composed, and extended his hand. Elena took it, forcing her fear into the smallest corner of herself. When she placed her foot on the red carpet, the noise swelled. Whispers filled the air, some curious, some cruel. Inside the grand ballroom, chandeliers glowed above marble floors, and the crowd shifted like a restless sea. Adrian's hand remained warm at the small of her back as he introduced her to people whose names carried weight like thunder. Senators, CEOs, heirs. Each smile aimed at her carried judgment beneath its surface. Elena smiled back, her voice steady as she repeated the rehearsed story of how she and Adrian had met by chance at a cafe. The lie felt strange on her tongue, yet every time her nerves threatened to show, Adrian's gaze anchored her, but Vanessa was already weaving her trap. She appeared across the room, her gown a dagger of black satin, her eyes glinting with malice. She didn't approach this time. Instead, she sent others, women with practiced smirks, men with sly questions. Whispers of doubt slid into the air, pressing against Elena like invisible hands. "So sudden, isn't it?" one woman murmured. "How convenient she appears after all these years," another added with a smile too sharp to be kind. Elena's stomach twisted. She excused herself, slipping toward the balcony for air. The city stretched out in endless light, and she pressed her palms against the railing, trying to breathe. Behind her, footsteps approached. Adrian's voice was low, close. "Don't let them see your fear. That is what Vanessa wants." Elena turned to him, her eyes burning. "I'm not made for this world. I can't fight battles in gowns and diamonds." Adrian stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "You think I was born for it? I wasn't. Every smile I wear is a shield. But tonight, I don't want shields. I want you." The words struck her harder than the cameras ever could. Her pulse raced as his hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch that felt dangerously real. Before she could answer, the ballroom doors opened, and a commotion rose. Someone had leaked photographs of Elena's modest apartment, splashed with headlines calling her a fraud, a woman chasing fortune. Gasps filled the hall as screens lit up with the breaking news. Vanessa stood at the center of it all, her smile triumphant. Elena's heart sank. The battle had just turned into open war. Silence heavy as stone inside Adrian's penthouse. The city roared far below, but in the towering glass walls that framed the skyline, everything felt distant and unreal. Elena stood at the window, her phone still buzzing with notifications she couldn't bear to read. Headlines painted her as a schemer, a nobody pretending to be somebody. Her private life dragged into the fire for strangers to devour. She felt hollow, her chest tight with humiliation. When she turned, Adrian was already there, his tie undone, his expression darker than she had ever seen it. He had been on the phone for hours, his voice sharp and clipped as he tried to contain the fallout, but even he could not silence the frenzy outside. "Vanessa planned this," Elena whispered, her voice unsteady. "She wanted to strip me down to nothing." Adrian's jaw clenched, his fists curling at his sides. "She won't win. I won't allow it." Elena laughed bitterly, though no humor touched her eyes. "You can't control what the world thinks. To them, I'm a joke. To her, I'm a target. And to you—" She stopped, the words tangling in her throat. Adrian crossed the room in 2 strides, his voice dropping to something raw, stripped of its usual armor. "To me, you are the only person who has looked me in the eye without wanting something in return." His confession hit her harder than the rumors. For the first time, she saw the cracks beneath his polished surface. The arrogance, the power, the untouchable air he wore like a second skin, all of it wavered now, revealing a man still haunted by betrayal. He turned away, his hand pressed against the glass wall, as if he needed the city lights to hold him up. "When I was a boy, my father left without a word. My mother raised me with steel in her spine, but every success I built was born from fear that I would be abandoned again. Vanessa knew that. She used it, twisted it. Ma, did me believe I could never trust anyone. Until you." Elena's breath caught. She had expected coldness, even anger, but not this. This unraveling of the man everyone else saw as unshakable. Before she could answer, the sound of shattering glass ripped through the moment. Someone had hurled a rock at the penthouse window from a rooftop across the street, the impact spiderwebbing the glass. A threat note was attached, its words jagged and cruel. "Leave him or be ruined." Elena's hands shook as she read it. Fear coiled in her stomach, real and sharp. This was no longer gossip or whispers, it was war played in shadows. Adrian took the note from her trembling fingers, his eyes blazing with a fury that chilled her. "She thinks she can scare you away," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "But she doesn't know you. And she doesn't know me." Elena met his gaze, torn between terror and a strange, unexplainable pull. For the first time, she realized that being beside Adrian was not only a performance. It was survival, and though every instinct screamed at her to run, her heart whispered something far more dangerous. "Stay." Outside, the cameras still flashed, and somewhere in the darkness, Vanessa smiled, already planning her next move. Rain slamming against the windshield of the black sedan as it sped away from the city. Thunder rolled like distant drums, each strike rattling the sky. Elena sat pressed against the leather seat, her fingers curled tightly in her lap, the storm outside mirroring the chaos inside her chest. Adrian's profile was sharp against the flickering flashes of lightning, his jaw set, his silence thick with something she couldn't read. The plan had been simple: escape the city noise for a few days at his countryside estate where the paparazzi couldn't reach them. But the storm grew wilder, winds clawing at the car until the driver announced the roads were flooding. By the time they reached the sprawling estate, rain drenched the world in darkness. The house loomed tall and shadowed, its windows glowing faintly in the downpour. When the doors swung open, Elena felt a shiver crawl up her spine. It was beautiful, but lonely, like a fortress built for a man who trusted no one. Inside, silence swallowed them. The storm howled through the chimneys, rattling the glass, flickering the power. Elena stood in the grand hall, water dripping from her hair, her heart hammering. She wasn't sure if she feared the storm outside or the man standing just a few feet away. Adrian shrugged off his jacket, his eyes fixed on her. "You should change. There are clothes in the guest room. This place will feel less hostile once you're dry." But the house remained hostile, every creak and shadow amplifying the tension that hung between them. Hours passed, thunder shaking the walls, the storm cutting off the power entirely. Candles were lit, throwing golden light across the dark wood, casting Adrian's features into sharp relief. They ended up in the library, flames crackling in the fireplace. Books lined the walls like silent witnesses. Elena sat in a chair, clutching the warmth of a cup of tea, while Ian leaned against the mantel, his gaze heavy on her. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "I don't regret pulling you into this, but I regret that it cost you your peace." Her eyes lifted to his, raw with exhaustion. "You turned my life into a spectacle, Adrian. Strangers threaten me, Vanessa humiliates me, and I don't even know if I can trust you." His expression shifted, something unguarded breaking through. "Then let me give you the truth no one else knows." He told her of the nights he couldn't sleep, haunted by betrayal, of the endless fear that every hand extended toward him was only reaching for his fortune. His voice was stripped bare, the storm outside echoing the storm inside him. Elena's heart ached, the anger inside her fighting with the tenderness blooming against her will. "And what am I to you?" she whispered. He stepped closer, the firelight flickering across his face. "You are the first person who doesn't wear a mask around me. You are the first person who feels real." The words hung between them, charged, dangerous. The storm outside surged, lightning flaring, and for a heartbeat, the world shrank to the inches between them. His hand brushed hers, tentative yet desperate, a touch that wasn't rehearsed, wasn't performance. Her breath caught, her pulse racing. She should have pulled away, but instead she stayed, and somewhere in the shadows of that vast estate, unseen eyes watched through a rain-smeared window, the faint glow of a camera lens recording every second, the sound of betrayal echoing louder than the storm that had passed. The morning sun struggled through gray clouds, but the warmth never reached the estate. Elena stirred awake in the guest room, the remnants of last night still tangled in her thoughts. Adrian's words had pierced through her defenses, his touch had unsettled her, and for the first time she had seen not the millionaire, but the man beneath the armor. Yet peace was fleeting. Her phone buzzed violently on the nightstand. She reached for it, and her breath froze. Every headline screamed the same accusation. Photographs of her from the night before, leaving Adrian's library, her hair loose, her gown clinging from the storm. The captions called her a seductress, a gold digger who had manipulated her way into the Blackwood Empire. One article even claimed she had a hidden past, quoting anonymous sources that described her as ruthless and calculating. Elena's hands trembled as she scrolled. Someone had been watching them, feeding lies to the press. When she stormed into the hall, Adrian was already there, his phone pressed to his ear, his face like carved stone. His gaze met hers, and for the first time she saw hesitation. "The board is pressuring me," he admitted. "They're questioning my judgment. Vanessa is behind this. She leaked those images." Elena's voice cracked. "And do you believe her?" The silence stretched like a blade between them. He did not answer quickly enough. His hesitation was its own confession. Rage and heartbreak tore through her chest. "You pulled me into this war, Adrian. You swore you would protect me, but the second she whispers poison, you doubt me." Adrian reached for her, his voice low, almost desperate. "Elena, listen. I don't doubt you. I doubt myself. I don't know who to trust anymore." But she stepped back, shaking her head, tears burning her eyes. "You don't need to trust me. I never asked for this." She turned, her footsteps echoing through the marble hall as she fled the estate. Adrian remained rooted where he stood, the weight of his empire pressing down heavier than ever. Outside, cameras already waited at the gates. Elena shielded her face, but the shouts followed her. They hurled questions about her supposed lies, her motives, her family. Flashes blinded her until the world felt like it was collapsing. Vanessa watched from a sleek car parked nearby, her lips curved into a victorious smile. She had cracked the fragile bond between them, and she wasn't finished. That night, Adrian sat alone in his office, the city lights burning below like a restless sea. In his hand lay the threatening note they had found days earlier. His mind replayed Elena's words, her face as she turned away. For the first time in years, the man who had built an empire with unshakable will felt powerless. But deep in the shadows, another piece of Vanessa's plan was already moving. An insider within Adrian's company had begun leaking sensitive information, making it look as though Elena was feeding her secrets. The stage was set for ruin, and Elena, unaware of the new storm building, could only think of how one reckless hand she had never asked him to hold had changed everything and might now destroy her. The city drowning in rumors, sharper than knives. Every newspaper, every blog, every late-night host repeated the same narrative. Elena Hart was a fraud who had tricked her way into Adrian Blackwood's life. She sat alone in her apartment, curtains drawn, her phone abandoned on the counter, the weight of betrayal crushing her chest. She told herself she should hate Adrian for doubting her, but hatred never came. Only the hollow ache of a trust broken too soon. Adrian, meanwhile, faced his empire unraveling. Board members whispered about his judgment, investors threatened to pull out, and Vanessa's shadow stretched longer with each passing hour. He stood in the center of his glass office, the skyline flashing behind him, when his closest advisor slid a file across the desk. Inside were records, phone logs, payments traced back to Vanessa, evidence that she had orchestrated the leaks, bribed insiders, and planted stories to destroy Elena. For the first time, fury burned through Adrian like wildfire. He had doubted the one woman who had given him honesty, and in doing so, he had handed victory to the enemy he feared most. He ordered his driver, and the night swallowed him as he hunted for Elena. But she was gone. She had left her job, vanished from her apartment, leaving only silence behind. Vanessa celebrated her victory at a glittering rooftop party, reporters circling her like moths. Champagne sparkled, her laughter rang out, but beneath her polished smile was the satisfaction of knowing she had bent the world to her will. Yet even in her triumph, she underestimated the depth of Adrian's resolve. Back at his penthouse, Adrian tore through every lead, calling in favors, tracing the leaks. Sleepless nights blurred into each other until finally he found it, a recording sent anonymously to his private email. Grainy footage from his countryside estate showing Elena standing by the fire, fear in her eyes, a shadow moving just beyond the glass. The proof that she had been watched, hunted, manipulated. His blood ran cold. This was more than scandal. It was war, and Elena had been the weapon. The next morning, Adrian stood before the board, his voice stripped of arrogance, filled instead with raw determination. He admitted his failure, confessed that he had doubted the only person who mattered, and promised he would expose Vanessa's corruption even if it cost him his empire. His words shocked them, the untouchable Blackwood finally showing cracks, finally showing heart. But the battle had only begun. Vanessa struck again that evening, releasing forged documents that framed Elena as a co-conspirator. The world turned darker, the headlines more brutal. And in a small town hours away, Elena watched from a motel room, tears streaking her face as she saw her name torn apart on the news. She told herself she was done, that she wanted nothing more to do with Adrian Blackwood. Yet when she saw the clip of him at the board meeting, his voice breaking as he said her name, something inside her cracked. For the first time, she realized that maybe the man who had pulled her hand that night wasn't just saving himself. Maybe he had been trying to save her too. The city holding its breath. Rumors swirled like smoke, headlines screamed betrayal, and Elena's name had become a weapon Vanessa wielded without mercy. Adrian knew there was only one way to end it. He had to face the world head-on, and he had to do it with nothing but the truth. The press conference was called at dawn. By the time the sun cut through the skyline, the hall was already filled with flashing cameras, restless journalists, and board members waiting to see if Adrian Blackwood would rise or fall. He stepped onto the stage in a tailored suit, but the usual armor in his eyes was gone. He looked raw, stripped, every movement deliberate, as if he knew this was his last chance. "For weeks," he began, his voice echoing, "a lie has been told. Not just about me, but about a woman who should never have been dragged into this storm. Her name is Elena Hart, and the truth is, she is not what the tabloids have painted her to be. She is better." The room shifted. Cameras clicked faster. Journalists leaned forward, hungry for scandal, but unprepared for honesty. He held up the file of evidence, the payments, the recordings, the proof of Vanessa's schemes. "The person behind this smear campaign is Vanessa Marlowe, the same woman who betrayed me years ago, who could not stand to see me find happiness elsewhere. She wanted to break Elena. She nearly succeeded. But I will not let her win again." From the back of the room, gasps echoed as Vanessa herself appeared, her crimson lips curved in a defiant smile. She had expected to be named, but not like this. "So dramatic, Adrian," she called out, her voice slicing through the noise. "Defending a woman who will never fit in your world. Do you think anyone here believes your little love story?" Adrian's gaze cut to her, cold and certain. "I don't care if they believe it. I care that she does." The hall erupted in chaos as reporters surged forward, but Adrian left the podium, his words hanging heavy in the air. Outside, in the chaos of cameras and shouting voices, he searched the crowd, and then he saw her. Elena stood at the edge of the throng, her hair pulled back, her face pale but her eyes fierce. She hadn't planned to come. She had sworn to herself she was done, but hearing his voice on the broadcast, raw with truth, had pulled her back. Adrian pushed past the cameras, ignoring the questions, until he was standing before her. "I was a coward," he said, his voice rough. "I doubted you when I should have fought for you. I let Vanessa's poison blind me, but I see now, and I will burn every part of this empire if it means you'll believe me when I say I love you." The world seemed to freeze. Journalists shouted, flashes exploded, but for a heartbeat, there was only silence between them. Elena's chest rose and fell, her tears bright in the morning light. She wanted to turn away, to protect herself, but the sight of him standing there, stripped of pride, his heart bared for everyone to see, cracked through her walls. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" "Yes," he whispered, "and I will spend the rest of my life making it right." And as the crowd roared around them, as Vanessa's mask finally slipped under the weight of her exposure, Elena found herself standing on the edge of an impossible choice: to walk away forever, or to believe that love could survive even this storm. Silence, but with the roar of headlines crashing across the world. Adrian Blackwood had publicly declared war on Vanessa and confessed his love for a woman no one had heard of just weeks before. The city was divided. Some mocked him for letting emotions steer an empire. Others whispered that for the first time, the man of steel had shown he was human. But none of that mattered to Elena as she stood in the quiet of her small apartment that evening, staring at the letter on her table. It wasn't from Adrian. It was from her younger sister, Sophie. The words spilled in rushed ink, a confession she had never expected. Sophie admitted that weeks ago, before the gala, she had written to Adrian Blackwood in secret. She had begged him to look after Elena, to help her carry the weight of debts and exhaustion she hid too well. Sophie had seen her breaking and had believed that maybe someone powerful enough could protect her. Sophie had never imagined that letter would change everything. Elena's hands shook as she read the final line. "I thought I was giving you help, but maybe I gave you something more. Maybe I gave you a chance at love." The truth hit like lightning. That night at the gala hadn't been fate twisting blindly. It had been her sister's desperate plea, answered in a way none of them could have predicted. Adrian hadn't simply chosen her out of the crowd by chance. He had known her name before the cameras ever flashed. Adrian arrived minutes later, his suit rumpled, his eyes dark with exhaustion but lit with determination. He saw the letter in her hand and froze. "You knew," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "You knew my sister asked you to protect me." Adrian stepped closer, his voice low. "Yes. I wasn't supposed to meet you that night, not like that. But when Vanessa cornered me, when I saw you standing there, I thought maybe this was my chance to protect you, the way your sister begged me to. I never planned what followed. I never planned to fall." Her tears blurred the room. "You should have told me." "I should have," he admitted, his voice cracking. "But every moment with you felt too real, too fragile. I was afraid if you knew, you'd think all of it was a lie. But it wasn't. Not one word, not one touch. Elena, I love you, not because your sister asked me to look after you, not because of the cameras, but because you are the first person who saw me not as Blackwood the millionaire, but as a man who was lost until he found you." Silence stretched, heavy with truth. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, the city restless. Elena looked at him, at the man who had broken her and fought for her, who had lied by omission but stood now with nothing left to hide, and slowly, her anger melted into something deeper, something she had been fighting all along. She stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Then prove it. Not to them. To me." Adrian's hand rose, trembling slightly as it cupped her face, and when his lips met hers, it was no staged performance, no shield against Vanessa, no headline waiting to be written. It was a promise sealed in the quiet of a small apartment, with no witnesses but their own racing hearts. In the days that followed, Vanessa's empire of lies collapsed under the weight of Adrian's evidence. The board backed him once more, the press turned its fury on her, and for the first time, she disappeared from the spotlight she had once owned. But the real victory wasn't in the business headlines or the saved empire. It was in the quiet mornings when Elena woke to find Adrian beside her. No cameras, no rumors, just the man who had once grabbed her hand in desperation and now held it with devotion. Their story had begun as a scandal, a spectacle of flashing lights and whispered lies. But it ended with Sumta. Vanessa could never destroy a love that had been born in chaos but survived because it was real. And as Elena looked out at the skyline one evening, Adrian's arm wrapped around her, she realized her sister's letter had not just changed her life. It had given her the one thing she never thought she would find in the arms of a stranger who became her truth forever.